What would it take for progressives to take over the Democratic Party, defeat the Republicans, and control the United States government, where they would afterward attempt and possibly succeed in implementing single payer health care, the Green New Deal, wage increases, free college, and other things that they like to propose? Well, first of all, it needs to be understood that a lot of commentators, even some in my very own comment section, like to talk about how, oh, the Democratic Party can't be taken over, wink, wink, wink. And my thing is, whether you like them or not, and I do not, the United States is a two-party system. I'd love to see the Greens be able to win some House seats, but that hasn't been the case. The only time they're ever able to get a little bit of attention is during the presidential elections, and that still is something where they, mostly come up short. I'm attempting to just be a little pragmatic in saying that I think there's a better chance of progressives getting attention for themselves if they go against incumbent Democrats for their positions than if they try to run as Green Party candidates in primaries against Democrats and others. I think it's easier to try and get positions in one of the two major parties than to try making a new one that's going to have to fight for ballot access and all the other shenanigans that go into trying to start your own movement. But putting that aside, another issue is that people look, I don't enjoy calling Americans ignorant, but it's like this. If we're being charitable, a lot of people, you can call them normies if you want, people who don't follow this stuff as regularly as the ones that, would call themselves more savvy of these political matters, they tend to only know certain things, right? And usually it's about their own country. So some person living out of Kansas who doesn't know that, the U.S. is the only developed country that doesn't have single payer might hear the word free health or the words free healthcare and link it to socialism and communism, right? These buzzword terms don't mean anything, because as far as they can tell, it's just a normal thing to have to, have your health care attached to your job or some other, nonsense that is leaving more and more people uninsured than should be in what is supposed to be the richest country in the world. If you're a person who lives in, let me think of another one. I don't want to beat up on the South. Utah, and let's say you went to some university that was out of state and paid out $10,000, $20,000 in loans and grants, or hell, even went to school, 30, 40 years ago when the costs were much lower than they are now. You might look at someone who wants free college and go, oh, this is, and I have seen this on Fox News, this isn't fair. I worked and had to go and pay off my loans, and this other person's getting a handout. And they wouldn't be able to accept the fact that it was wrong for them to have to pay to get schooling in a country that supposedly encourages people to get an education. And it's simply a matter of, from their perspective, they think they're being cheated when they're being cheated by the system via its compassion for people who came after them, when in reality the system cheated them and they should be mad at the system that forced them to have to pay versus an attempt at righting the wrong later on. And it's hard to convince, because, and I have tried, man. When you talk to some of these people, it's not even just older people. It can be people who are around the same age, don't follow this stuff. They can fall for propaganda very easily. They can hear something like about the border and think, illegal immigrants are just flooding into the U.S. every day. And it's hard to sit there and explain to them, no, this statistic shows, this is happening. And even when introducing a lot of these concepts, like I told a person about single payer healthcare, they thought it meant healthcare for single parents. I just put my hand over my face. Because some people, even when they don't know something, they don't want to admit they don't know it. There is this strange desire to not appear ignorant, even if you are. And I do think the first step to learning things or being susceptible to new information is accepting the fact that we're not infallible, that sometimes there are things we haven't heard of or thought of that somebody else might propose. And it's difficult to get people to care about things that they don't, because we talked as well about the mundane existence, where people are only concerned about things that affect them. And that has always been, in my view, the real reason a lot of people don't care about, like, knowing just basic either things about history or about their own damn government. Like, there were a lot of people who got excited, right, about, for example, marijuana getting legalized over here in California. But make no mistake, if they didn't smoke pot, if they didn't know someone who smoked pot, they wouldn't care about what was legalized. And I actually had to explain to someone that it wasn't legalized in every state. They didn't know that state laws, vary, and some places have it legal, some places have, it legal for medical use, and some places like South Carolina have it banned altogether. So it's one of those things where people have to feel like it affects them, and also they sometimes have to have a person just directly spread stuff to them. It's a difficult task. Getting people who don't care to care is one of the hardest parts about politics, especially in the modern era where there's so much stuff that just distracts us, right? Like, if it's not music, it's some show or, some other entertainment crap. And when you try to sit someone down and go, hey, look, maybe we should organize something so that, I don't know, people get paid $2 more, $3 more. It's hard to have a conversation with a person about that and get them to, actually take that stuff seriously. But no, I think it's going to be a mixture of doing things within the Democratic Party. I know everybody hates, when I bring that up, because that's like the worst thing ever, to try and work within one of the two major parties. Even though all the prominent politicians that are active now are doing it, but I'm crazy for thinking that's a viable strategy. And people need to get to a point where they feel as if things affect them, because empathy is something that is really missing in modern society. This selfish me era, and that has to, you have to play into that while also not directly insulting them over the fact, like, yeah, you only care about this because it affects you, which I do think is a key problem. But yeah, if there's enough of a backlash to a lot of the stuff that Trump is going to do, maybe that shifts the Overton window a little bit. But also, like, I can't even say that, because there was a period during the, was it first 2 years of him being in office, that a lot of us thought people would get sick of this right-wing crap. They'd want something left-wing. They'd go with Sanders. And Democrats were successfully able to, and this is combined with them playing games in terms of, having different people drop out to all coalesce around one person, and just, little shady stuff in the background. But they were able to successfully trick voters into thinking the most important thing about the 2020 election was getting rid of Trump. And that caused them to elect someone who had their brain leaking out of their ears, who had no actual belief system. And basically it's like this. They went with what they considered to be a safe option in Biden, but the safe option, which was so devoid of any actual desire to reform and change the system, ended up letting them down just as much as Trump did, if not more. Where it's basically a matter of, because they were so concerned about the immediate desire to just get rid of Trump, they didn't think about, hey, so what about my wages? What about, my healthcare being tied to my job? What about, the environment and pollution? And Also, hey, maybe we can actually get some immigration reform. That, like, they just weren't concerned about that. It all became this cult of personality where, getting rid of this singular man who was only going to be in office for a few more years anyway, was the single most important thing to them over any actual substantive change to their lives that can be done by both a president that wants to do them and a Congress that is not, bought and paid for, like the one we currently have. So it's a matter of those three things having to come together. There has to be backlash to the incumbents. There has to be a belief that this affects them, and yet you have to do it within one of the two major parties. It pains me to say that, but that's just from what I have seen over the last few years. That is the only way to get a few victories per year within American politics.